Picture this. A city in lockdown. Empty highways stretch to the horizon. Airplanes grounded, their wings collecting dust. Faces hidden behind masks, eyes darting with suspicion. A silence hangs heavy, broken only by the wail of ambulance sirens. This was 2020, the moment when COVID froze the world in its tracks. But while the virus was new, the pattern was not. For centuries, disease has not only claimed lives, it has rewritten the script of power. Epidemics test rulers in ways wars cannot. They are invisible, unpredictable, and merciless. And again, when disease strikes, we see the same battle: fear against freedom, authority against trust. To see this clearly, we don't start with COVID. We must travel back, far back, to the deadliest of all plagues. The year is 1348. In Florence, bells toll day and night. Entire families vanish in days. Priests abandon their parishes. Carts piled with corpses roll through narrow streets. The Black Death does more than kill. It shatters the foundations of Europe. Fields lie untended, castles emptied, markets silenced. Feudal lords, once the unchallenged masters of peasants, now find themselves begging for workers. Here is the scandal of power. Instead of yielding to this new reality, kings and nobles try to choke it. In England, the Statute of Labourers freezes wages, making it illegal for peasants to demand fair pay. A desperate attempt to hold back a tidal wave of change, but the attempt backfires. Revolts erupt. Power, once absolute, is suddenly fragile. Thomas Hobbes would not be born for another 3 centuries, but his ghost seems to hover here. Hobbes believed that without a strong sovereign, society collapses into chaos, a war of all against all. And in the plague years, Europe came terrifyingly close to that vision. Yet here lies the paradox. The Black Death weakened the feudal grip, but also paved the way for stronger states. Out of the ashes, new bargains formed. Rulers consolidated power, while peasants claimed rights they had never dared demand. The plague was not just a tragedy, it was a reset button. Jump forward to 1918, Philadelphia. The world is still at war. Soldiers march, flags wave, brass bands play. A massive parade fills the streets, celebrating patriotism and sacrifice. But behind the music, whispers of danger spread. Doctors warn that a strange flu is moving faster than bullets, filling hospital wards with gasping lungs. They beg officials to cancel the parade. The city says no. Within a week, thousands are dead. The scandal is not just the deaths, it is the silence. Newspapers downplay the crisis to protect morale. Leaders hide the scale of infection, fearing panic more than plague. John Locke, the philosopher of rights, would have been horrified. To him, the very purpose of government is to safeguard life. Yet here, governments gambled with lives for the sake of propaganda. The Spanish flu killed more people than the war itself. But the deeper wound was trust. Citizens learned that their leaders would let them die if the truth threatened power. And yet, once again, out of betrayal came reform. Public health systems were strengthened. Disease surveillance expanded. The idea that governments must plan for pandemics became permanent. But here's the twist. Every reform also enlarged the reach of the state. Every safeguard was also a leash. Epidemics reveal a truth that never disappears. When fear spreads, freedom shrinks. The year is 1854. In London's Soho district, families crowd into tiny rooms. The stench of sewage seeps through the air. Then, one by one, people collapse. Blue lips, sunken eyes, violent spasms. Cholera has arrived again. At first, doctors blame bad air or moral weakness. But one physician, John Snow, traces the outbreak to a single water pump on Broad Street. His discovery is revolutionary. The disease is not divine punishment, but contaminated water. When the pump handle is removed, the deaths fall sharply. Snow saves lives, but more importantly, he changes politics. Suddenly, health is no longer private. The state must intervene. Clean water, sewage systems, sanitation, these become matters of government responsibility. Here, Michel Foucault steps into the story. Writing in the 20th century, Foucault argued that power increasingly took the form of biopolitics. Governments managing bodies, regulating life itself, not through swords or taxes, but through public health. Cholera wasn't just a disease, it was a trigger for the modern surveillance state, but this story has a darker side, because while London reformed, the British Empire watched its colonies suffer. In India, cholera outbreaks killed millions, year after year. Colonial officials often dismissed it as the fault of native ignorance, refusing to fund clean water for poor communities while European enclaves remained safe. The scandal wasn't just disease, it was neglect. Imperial power decided whose lives were worth saving. And the paradox, out of these horrors came modern epidemiology, urban planning, even international health systems. But always, power decided where reform landed and where suffering continued. Now, return to our own century. COVID-19, streets patrolled by soldiers, airports turned into graveyards of empty planes, phones buzzing with tracking alerts, a world paused, waiting. Governments across the globe invoked emergency powers, lockdowns, curfews, travel bans. For some, these were lifelines. For others, shackles. Hobbes's Leviathan returned in full force, obey and we will protect you. Yet Locke's ghost whispered, but what of liberty? The scandals. In Britain, hastily signed contracts funneled billions to politically connected firms for masks and protective gear, some of it faulty, some never delivered. In the US, reports surfaced of senators dumping stocks after private briefings, profiting while the public remained in the dark. Meanwhile, pharmaceutical giants saw record profits from vaccines. Joseph Stiglitz and other economists warned the very companies saving lives were also deepening inequality. Rich countries secured doses, poorer nations waited months. And then came surveillance. Governments rolled out apps to track contacts, drones to monitor streets, emergency laws to expand authority. Some powers were temporary, others quietly linger. Nietzsche would call this creation out of catastrophe. The pandemic gave us unprecedented collaboration, rapid scientific breakthroughs, digital revolutions in work and education. But Nietzsche also warned, every creation casts a shadow. Those shadows look like permanent surveillance, deeper divides between rich and poor, and governments reluctant to surrender control. The paradox is clear. COVID revealed both the best of human ingenuity and the oldest truth of power. Crisis expands authority, and rarely does that authority retreat. Step back now. Across centuries, epidemics have left behind more than graves. They have redrawn maps of trust and authority. The Black Death cracked feudalism, then hardened monarchies. The Spanish flu exposed betrayal by silence. Cholera birthed modern sanitation, but also imperial neglect. COVID restructured the 21st century and taught us the cost of obedience. Jean-Jacques Rousseau would say that in times of crisis, we act for the general will, sacrificing for the collective good. Yet history shows that sacrifice is never equal. The poor dig graves while the powerful sign contracts. Hobbes would argue that only strong states can prevent chaos. Locke would counter that rights must never be abandoned. And Nietzsche, smiling grimly, would remind us, destruction is also creation. Out of ashes, new worlds always emerge, but never without shadows. So here is the haunting paradox. Plagues don't just kill, they reveal. They show us what our leaders value, what freedoms we're willing to surrender, and how power adapts in the face of fear. And when the dust settles, the streets reopen, the masks come off, and the sirens fade into memory, one thing remains constant: the machinery of power, reshaped, enlarged, waiting for the next crisis. This is Now and Then Narratives, where history doesn't just repeat, it reveals.